Hello, I'm Paul Gates, and welcome to the Academics. I'm joined by my fellow panelists, Dr. Dave Spiceland and Christine Trexler. Now, Appalachian State Junior Tyler Harden will go over the topics that will be discussed today.
Hello, I'm Tyler Harden. Today on the Academics, the panel will discuss the current events affecting us globally, nationally, and locally here in the High Country. Today's topics are President Trump's first days in office, Pat McCrory contesting the election results, and Betsy DeVos as the new Secretary of Education.
Thank you, Tyler. Today on the Academics, we'll first be discussing how President Trump's first days in office are impacting the nation, the world, and Appalachian. Has Trump's election shaken the American people's faith in democracy? What do you think? I mean, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of controversy, and we've got attacks on the media as the enemy of the American people, attacks on the federal judiciary. These are serious topics. And so what is this doing to the electorate?
Well, I do believe that some people have their faith shaken in democracy, especially when you are discussing potential like Russian involvement and things along that line. Whether that's true or not, it is enough to concern people and definitely make them question the results of the election. I don't think that it is going to be the death of democracy or anything like that. We'll have to see for the 2018 midterm elections. I think it'll be very interesting to see if there's a higher voter turnout, since so many people have expressed dissatisfaction with what is currently happening in the country.
Well, it's true. The midterms are what, 19 months away?
Mm-hmm.
We're counting already.
And that'll be here before we know it. And if things are not resolved, I think, to people's satisfaction, these things might have some impact. Dave? Yep.
Well, it sort of begs the question, do we have a democracy or do we have a representative form of government? You know, the people rule directly. We don't really have that in this country. You might in New Hampshire, New England, somewhere where they have the local folks that come out, whatever, for meetings.
The town meeting.
But you know, democracy thrives on controversy. And you can go back to Andrew Jackson, you can go back to where people were dueling, and fortunately we don't have dueling today. I think some people would like to see that. It could make great television, I guess. But we've always had, in fact, I've heard somebody say, well, there's never been a presidency that's been in such controversial or whatever. And again, Andrew Jackson, Adams versus Jefferson, you know, that election, and my students think I was there, but I wasn't. That's a long time ago. So, yeah, do people lose faith in democracy? Probably. But again, we don't have a direct form of representation like that.
Well, these examples, you know, are all pre-Civil War examples. I mean, this was a long time ago. And of course, society was much different then too. You know, with your dueling comment there, and that's absolutely true. But you know, the federal judiciary is probably the number one defense we have against authoritarianism. Mm-hmm. And the press, you know, the fourth estate watchdog function that the press performs, and calling the integrity of those two institutions into question is, I think, particularly problematic.
Go for it.
Well, I do agree with you on a lot of points, especially about attacks on the media, attacks on our judiciary branch of the government. But in general, what a lot of people are losing faith in is their own parties. So for Hillary being the candidate, Hillary Clinton, that made a lot of people believe that the Democratic Party is out of touch with the government. People felt like they weren't listened to. There were allegations about voter fraud. I believe that was in Arizona. So that was something that undermined democracy to them. And people didn't care at some point if Democrats lost the election because they wanted to punish the Democratic Party. At least a lot of individuals my age held that belief, not the entire Democratic Party. On the Republican side, people feel out of touch on that end as well. We had Shavitz last night, I believe it was, make a comparison between buying an iPhone and buying health care. And an iPhone can be about $1,000, and that's a lot of money, but healthcare can be tens of thousands of dollars. So that's really not touching on the issue of healthcare. That's not just Democrat issue, it's a Republican issue, it's the United States, the people need their health care. And to say that it's don't buy that iPhone, buy your health care, that to me shows you're out of touch, and it's making people dissatisfied within their own parties.
And apparently, well, of course, the new healthcare plan was just rolled out without numbers. People are already, complaining about the fact that we have no idea how much any of these changes are going to cost. And apparently, the healthcare industry is kind of lined up against from what they've against the plan from what they've said so far. So this is something, of course, we're going to have to keep an eye on. It's a long-running story. It's centerpiece probably of the Trump campaign. So it's not going away anytime soon.
Well, going back to the question about Trump, the thing about it is people think of him as a Republican, and the Republican establishment has not warmed up to him, and he has done his best through the campaign, to some extent after he was elected and after he was inaugurated, to kind of irritate everybody in terms of the political party system. So he's a different politician. Some call him a populist, whatever that is. But he's done his best to kind of irritate everybody in many ways. And again, before the election, I think he's had some people maybe take him aside and say, you need to be a little more governing. You need to be a little more, whether he takes that advice or not, who knows?
Yeah, it's maybe a little less spontaneous. I mean, he's still, after the address to Congress the other night, no more trivial fights were promised. And then, that lasted 4 days.
Yeah.
And he goes on Twitter and attacks Arnold Schwarzenegger over the...
But I think that was before his address, though, before Congress.
No, that was after. It was the weekend, same weekend as the wiretapping.
Yeah, when he
controversy,
alleged
which, of
Obama
course,
was
now
wiretapping.
Now we've got that to deal with. Remember, I mean, Sean Spicer he first came out and said that we got to find out if he's being investigated, and then he gets slipped that piece of paper, and then he says, "Well, no, he's not being investigated." So we
Just
don't
for the
know about
record,
that yet.
Sean Spicer and Spice Land are not related. We are not related at all. So,
And that's a good distinction to make, Dave. Good. One thing, without regard to any Russian involvement or anything like that, but these things we've been talking about, how do the Russians look at this? Are they glad we're having these?
I don't think they would be
debates,
upset
or-
about it, because it is, we're another world power. We have a really long, lengthy history with Russians, the Cold War. It wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing to improve relations with them, but it is a really complex matter with President Trump in the past claiming to have a relationship with Putin, and then now kind of denying it, saying, I don't really know the man. And in general, it's just not looking good on our end, kind of undermining our democracy. Putin has had tactics when we criticize Russia for human rights, pointing out our own inequalities and things like that that happen in our country. So it just strengthens that argument for him.
Let's turn to North Carolina.
well, one more thing
okay,
about
all right, Dave.
when the Democrats have attacked the Republicans for daring to talk to an ambassador, the Democrats have done it. McCaskill, there's pictures of McCaskill and Pelosi with the Russian ambassador at some point. The context, what that is still, being discussed. So, and people talk to ambassadors. It happens all the time.
Sure.
And Putin, I mean, you've got the video from 2012, March, I think it was March the 4th, where Obama has an open mic and he leans over and tells Medvedev that I'll have more flexibility after I'm elected. And he leans over and touches President Obama and says, I'll be sure and tell Vladimir that. So there's always been intrigue and, those kinds of things. And Russia's a different animal. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but, the Russians have had their problems going back to the Soviets and Vladimir, and not Vladimir Lenin, so.
Okay, North Carolina. The results of the gubernatorial election were held up a little bit for about a month while Pat McCrory asked for a recount. Nothing changed significantly number-wise. I mean, it was still about the 10,000 vote margin. But What was that about? Why was he contesting that?
I definitely believe it was in McCrory's right to contest it because it was such a close call. It was Durham County, kind of their votes came in late. It was kind of an odd situation, but they had issues earlier in the day. I think a big thing is McCrory lost votes with HB2, with Interstate 77, which is around the Charlotte area. He lost votes around the Lake Norman because he did not deny that turning into a toll road. And then also, it's kind of plagued him in his involvement with Duke Energy, the Duke coal ash scandal that happened. He has lost votes for people who otherwise may identify as Republican and would have voted for him in a different circumstance.
And why did he try so hard, though, to keep up with the keep the uncertainty going? I mean, I've always thought it was pretty clear that due to gerrymandering and so forth, that the Republicans were going to win the State House and the Senate. And of course, in making a last-ditch effort there to get the governor's mansion, that would be a trifecta. And of course, at that point, the Republicans could do whatever they wanted. And so I think that had something certainly to do with it, that they were trying to solidify the hold on state government even more than they already had.
I'm shocked that power would enter into the discussion here. He didn't want to lose. I think that's why he fought the way he did, and like Christine said, he didn't want to lose, and he, his contesting of the election. But it wasn't just the HB2. Apparently, got a lot of people in Charlotte ticked off with the whole toll road thing.
Right. Well, that's the population center of the state and the main, one of the main interstate highways.
Area code 704.
That's it. We
Yeah.
see it all the time. Right. Is this going to influence the budget? How, McCrory was not a friend of state employees. Cooper's come out with a pretty modest 2% suggestion for raise for state employees with a $500 bonus. If you get a Democratic governor coming up with a 2% offer to state employees, can we imagine what the Republicans would come up with this year if McCrory were still in office? God, 1.5% last year.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, well, oh no, that's of course it's negotiation.
Yeah.
But 2% is a pretty modest ask to start with, and the Republicans, I think, might whittle that down to considerably.
Well, in dealing with any kind of legislative body, you're herding cats. And it doesn't matter if you're the same party or whatever, they just kind of do, legislative bodies do what they want to do.
That's right. Sure. Okay, another subject, education. What do we think about Betsy DeVos as the new Secretary of Education?
I think it was a very controversial pick, but that doesn't come as a surprise with other appointments that have been made. But what really makes her stand out is that she does not have experience with public schools, which if you want to send your children to private school, if you attend private school, that's not an issue. But to be the Secretary of Education, to not have experience really working with public schools is certainly going to cause problems. Even just seeming unknowledgeable about what the job entails during her confirmation hearing. She did not know something that's vital to education, to assess performance, which is the growth versus proficiency debate. She seemed like she couldn't take a hard stance on it because she wasn't knowledgeable enough to make a stance. She also has a lot of involvement with charter schools, which some people love them, some people are against them. Some have great success, but a lot of the ones in Michigan have been underperforming, and they've largely been unregulated, and she very largely supports deregulation of charter schools and for vouchers and things of that nature. So I do think it's very controversial, and I'm not a supporter of that. I think there are a lot of better choices. Educators just from around the country, top educators could have definitely taken that spot.
And more to the point about the lack of experience, remember also in her confirmation hearings, she didn't seem to understand that special education is mandated by federal law and has been since 1973. So it's that highlights that lack of experience, and of course, she's very ideologically driven. as a cabinet pick, joins the billionaires club.
I'd love to be on the billionaires club.
Well, I'd like to be too.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
wouldn't want to be Secretary of Education.
Well, and supposedly she said that she was going to take away free lunches. I think we had that in the crawl. But she made a statement at CPAC about telling Bernie Sanders to his face that there's no free lunch. And somehow that's got wrapped into that she wanted to take away free lunches. And I've done some research on this, and I can't find where she said that, because the USDA, they're the ones that administer the health, the lunch program or whatever. And I used to get subsidized, I won't say what year it was, roughly in the 1950s, 60s, but I think my milk cost 2 cents a packet, something like that, which was pretty good.
Well, actually, I read the transcript, and I read it as the free lunch comment as, in sort of the metaphorical sense where we usually use it, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
You don't get anything for free. But, of course, school lunches are a significant concern to, a lot of families. How is this going to affect Watauga County? Anything on that, Christine?
It definitely is vital to Watauga County Public Schools. A lot of children do count on these just for having one nutritionally sound meal a day. In some areas, they have a push to have these during the summer because when school's not in session, these same kids aren't guaranteed that meal. So it's vital to the education system. You're at school for 8 hours a day, you got to have some meals. I think it would be a lot of conflict if she did try to do anything to defund that. But as Dr. Spiceland was saying, that is funded by the Department of Agriculture. I believe Sonny Perdue was appointed, and I couldn't find his stance on it, but I feel like it's secure and that we wouldn't be having those lunches taken away.
What the research that I've been able to look at suggested that the Republican idea here is not to eliminate free lunches, but to raise the percentage of needy students required to qualify. It's currently 40% for reduced lunches, meals, breakfast too. For a family of 4, it's for families under roughly $45,000 in income, and for free lunches, roughly under $32,000. Watauga County, 41.3% of kids fall into that group. So we barely make the threshold now. That compares with 56% for the state. So we are less dependent on free lunches than the state as a whole. But still, moving it up to 60 would change the game for a lot of people. And have you anybody with some numbers on how much that might involve as far as dollars and cents?
I don't know.
Anything about that? It's,
Well, the whole thing kind of begs the question about the Department of Education, which a Republican mantra has been for years to get rid of that at the federal level and to allow the states to have more control over education. And so what happens in Massachusetts might not be what happens in North Carolina and vice versa. I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying that that's something that Republicans have talked about for a long time.
well, as long as you mentioned the topics on the national level in education, how about the Common Core? Have we heard anything about that yet? I haven't. And I'm kind of surprised that hasn't come up yet. First it was a great idea, then it was a bad idea. I'm not sure where it stands at this point.
Well, and what are they teaching? And I've seen some horror stories, which, every time I read these horror stories, I'm thinking, is this real? But that would be an interesting endeavor to look to see at the federal level, apparently. What values are being taught? What are, we're at the university level, but K through 12. What are they supposed to be teaching? What kind of math are they teaching? And those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, of course, the controversy is going to be too, what values are they teaching? That's different from teaching math. I like to
But
think
even the kind of math. I remember the year after me, when I was, again, back in the 1800s, when I was in school. By the way, that was sarcasm. But there was this new math that came along. And these guys would come to school and I have no idea what's going on. So there's a lot of things in terms of the new, fill in the blank.
Yeah, well, you mentioned math, new math. Is is phonics taught in school anymore?
Should be.
Should be. I
Wish
mean,
to
that's
it.
what we went through.
Yeah.
Rather than the whole language method, is that the other one that I still don't understand?
And one more thing, if I could do it, I would require everybody to learn a second language.
That would be a good.
But I'm in the minority.
That would be a good idea.
Oh yeah.
Yes, that would. Well, that's our time for this week. Christine?
Thank you for tuning in to the academics. See you next time.